Are you looking for an antidote to information overload? Well, at a time when the news cycle is moving faster than ever, The Week is here to help. Our new digital subscription includes a twice-daily digest of the day's most interesting, important stories, along with the liveliest comment and analysis delivered to your app or inbox. Head to theweek.com/offer and use the code SPRING24. That's SPRING24 at theweek.com/offer. Sale ends 6th of May. It's the week ending Friday the 3rd of May, and this is The Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen Humza Yousaf stepping down as First Minister of Scotland, a sword attack in northeast London killing 14-year-old Daniel Anjorin, and police officers in riot gear on US campuses amidst widespread pro-Palestinian protests. You can read all you need to know about everything that matters in The Week magazine, but we're here to bring you some stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news, not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Ollie Mann. Let's unwrap the week. And joining me today from the Week's digital team is Harriet Marsden from Daily Podcast, Today in History with the Retrospectors. Never heard of it. It's Arian McNichol. And we welcome back writer and performer Suchandrika Chakrabarti. Now, when you guys are listening to this, the local elections and mayoral elections will have happened, but we're recording on the day. So, Suchandrika, have you voted?
I haven't voted yet. I have to go to an Army Reserve Centre later to do that, so can't wait.
You might get a 2-for-1. You might get signed up as a reservist.
Could do the work.
Harriet, have you voted? I think of you as our mayor.
I'll take that. No, I haven't voted yet. I'm waiting for a break in the rain, which I suspect quite a few people will do. But that is not a good enough excuse not to go out and vote. So I will right after we record this.
And Arian, you have a great excuse for no longer being interested in who the Crime Commissioner for Surrey is, which is you're now in Australia.
Well, yes and no, but this will be the first British election that I haven't voted in 20 years, having just come back to Australia after that amount of time. And I should have got my act together and actually done a remote vote thing, but I didn't because I've been settling into a new country.
Affecting the outcome for people that live in a different country to where you are. You're part of the problem, mate.
He doesn't look like he's been voting for 20 years.
Very kind.
This is getting flirtatious now. Harriet, you're up first. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Are we one step closer to universal donor blood?
We were going around to the tables as they were donating, thanking them. And this gentleman that I didn't know before, he said I had read her story on Red Cross and I knew I needed to donate. And this is my first time and I want to keep doing it for you, London. Today she's doing great. She's getting stronger by the day. And after 15 long months, we are proud to announce that she is cancer-free. Giving blood is important to so many people. It could be from anywhere from cancer to HEMOC to trauma victims. Their lives depend on blood donors. And with the one little needle poke that you get for donating blood is nothing compared to the pokes and prods that these patients that need the blood actually go through.
Carly Hamilton, whose daughter had cancer, speaking to the American Red Cross in a video posted to their YouTube channel on Wednesday. So why the focus on blood donation this week?
Well, researchers in Denmark and Sweden have discovered this new way to strip away the markers that determine a blood type from red blood cells. So this study published on Monday, I'm going to massively simplify it, but it basically is a step closer to making any blood type in the A group, so A positive or A negative, or the B group, so B positive, B negative, those would be the most common ones, into an O type or a universally compatible donor blood.
Hold on. So they're researching how to take your blood, regardless of what blood type you are, and turn it into O. Why?
Well, because we need more blood. At the moment, the blood of a donor and the blood of a recipient, the blood types need to match in order for it to work. So if you're donating a blood, let's say my blood type is, A positive, for example, it's not compatible. You can't have that blood, you can't receive that blood if you aren't the same blood type. So the only exception to that is part of a blood group, the O blood group, which is O negative, which is considered to be the universal blood donor type because anyone can receive that blood without a potentially fatal reaction. And we just don't have enough blood to meet the need, basically.
So I guess the advantage, Arian, would be in an emergency situation, you can operate immediately regardless of whether you have a matching blood type.
Yes, exactly. If you can dispense with group matching, that would allow blood banks to call on donors of all kinds when there's an urgent shortage, not just with the O group blood type, because they can take anyone's blood, and then, with this new technology, if it shakes out this way, they'd be able to convert it to a universal type, and then it can go into absolutely anyone. And that would mean waiting lists for organ transplants could also shorten, because organ donors and recipients currently need to have a compatible blood group. But again, you solve that problem. So you've just got this massive solution to the problem that, as Harriet says, is a worldwide one, that there is this global shortage of blood supply needed for life-saving transfusions. And if you can just get all of this blood to work in the same way, then you solve that problem.
That's interesting, isn't it, Shichandika, that it is an international issue? Because I've seen in the UK people talking about the NHS strikes, for example, as being one factor potentially in why there's less blood than there used to be around in hospitals when it's needed. But this does appear to be an issue all around the world.
Yeah, definitely. So it's also an issue in America, where the Red Cross announced in January that blood donations are at a 20-year low. They've dropped by 40% over those last 2 decades. And this problem has been made worse by the pandemic, certainly. That's a huge issue. Lots of businesses have gone remote. There's been a drop in blood drives and changes in eligibility for being a donor. But in other countries as well, they're facing issues with blood that's ready to transfuse. So Japan faces the possibility of being hit by a severe shortage of donated blood, and that's because young people aren't coming forward to donate. Kenya's experiencing blood deserts in some of its cities. And in Australia, they need an additional 1,200 donations every day over the next week to prevent a shortage. So the country needs around 33,000 donations every week to meet the country's demand. So they're in kind of a tricky place at the moment as well.
And Harriet, what do you think the reason is that here in the UK we are seeing a shortage of blood donation?
Well, as Shichandika said, a lot of people are blaming staff shortages in the NHS, unfilled vacancies, staff illnesses, industrial strike action. But actually, there has been a government neglect of blood and transplant services. And this campaign that the government launched, this major campaign, most people didn't even know about it. So there's a communication issue as well. I do genuinely believe that people don't realise how bad the blood shortage is in the UK, because the campaigning messaging is wrong. It's not saying we have an urgent shortage of blood. It's saying do something amazing, give blood, like it's some altruistic thing you might do as a sort of extra in your spare time. Also because increasingly the population is elderly, and what that means is that they're receiving more transfusions and more blood-intensive medical procedures. So just to put it in context, one person donating blood would give a pint, let's say, 1 unit, whereas a car accident victim or someone who suffered a major trauma could need up to 100 units of blood. So there's just this incredible mismatch between the demand and the supply.
But also we do have a bureaucratic system in the NHS, don't we? I mean, this is just my personal anecdote, so I'm not saying this is representative, but I know that my wife has been trying to give blood for 6 months, and she got an appointment that then got cancelled, then she got a second appointment that she couldn't make, then she got a third appointment that got cancelled, then she finally got a fourth appointment, took the morning off, drove to the hospital, paid for the parking, went and got her blood taken, and they buggered up the injection. The needle went in wrong. It bruised her arm, and then they said, "Oh, sorry, we can't use this," and had to throw the bag away and sent her home with a leaflet saying, "This is what happens when you get a bruise." And she, as yet, has not got her fifth appointment.
I think it's fair to say that that's a really common experience. And I think a lot of people don't realise as well that there is a specific Give Blood app. And as you say, there's major bureaucracy and major issues with digitising the process. But for people who are O negative blood type, so it's about 18% of the population who have naturally this universal blood type, they are called upon regularly. So my best friend is actually giving blood today. He's O negative, and they regularly call upon those people. But if you could have a situation in which every single person who's donated A type blood or B type blood or even O positive, if that blood could be instantly transformed into universally appropriate blood, that would instantly double your supply. And it would also massively minimize waste. I mean, Arian's mentioned a lot of the logistics around, difficulties with getting blood in an emergency situation and then how long it takes to match blood types. But also, I don't know if you guys knew this, but I didn't realize that blood had an expiry date. Like, donated blood can only be stored for so long and then it has to be thrown away.
Well, I suppose the whole modern concept of a blood bank is kind of a modern concept, isn't it, Arian? We've talked about this a bit on the retrospectives.
Yes, exactly. The guy who came up with the whole notion of blood banks was an American physician called Dr. Bernard Fantus, and in 1937 he was the director of Cook County Hospital in Chicago and was looking for a way to provide a reliable source of blood for transfusions and came up with this notion of blood banks. You know, before then, you just basically, if someone needed blood, you'd immediately call all of their friends and relatives and they'd have to try and get to the hospital as quickly as possible to try and donate. But he had this idea that you get people to bank blood, and in the early days it was really very literal. You know, the amount of blood that you put into the bank was the exact same amount that you could get out of the bank, and that idea then transitioned into this more sort of benevolent idea of blood banks that we have today, where you give blood not for yourself, but for other people. And I think that that is what really highlights what's going on here. The fact that this is, as Harriet said, a kind of supply and demand problem. And I think that this simple fact that so many people have the experience that your wife had, Ollie, of wanting to go and give blood but not being able to due to, I don't know, either bureaucracy or other things that are standing in their way. I think that that is the primary issue, and also the fact that people don't know how much of a deficit their country and, you know, by extrapolation, the world is in terms of blood. I think if more people knew that it was so massively required and there was such a shortage, that more people would go ahead and find a way to do it.
Yes, and there was an ickiness in those early days of receiving blood, obviously, because people weren't sure that it could be done, that you could get blood from a donor. You know, the public needed to be convinced about what the scientists knew, particularly in a racist society in the USA where people were like, you know, white people were saying they didn't want black people's blood, etc. Do you think there could be an ickiness with this, Suchandrika, where scientists can say, well, we can make a universal blood out of everyone's blood, but the public might just feel, no, I don't want the universal scientifically tampered with blood. I would like the blood that matches my blood type.
I guess it depends on who you're asking, because the person needing the transfusion is probably not in a state at that time, because it's usually emergencies, I imagine. So I guess it depends if there's something they have to sign. I think these days people generally see this as a positive thing, that actually, no pun intended, as a good thing, because this just means there's more blood that's available for every person out there, regardless of their blood type, if indeed this scientific breakthrough changes how blood banks work. So it just seems like a really great thing to me, really.
Do you agree, Harriet? And do you think that this is going to be the moment that pivoted it? And, you know, we will see universal blood coming to our blood banks?
Well, that's the hope. I mean, this is this field of study with scientists experimenting with enzymes to remove the A or B antigens. It's like 40 years old. So this is a really significant step in a field that has been ongoing for decades. The hope is one day to be able to develop this. It's not necessarily a universal blood type as much as it is you can change any blood to work with anyone. I also just need to correct what I said earlier. It's not 14% of people who have O negative blood type. It's about 7 or 8%, but it accounts for twice that of demand. So that's the difference. But no, I don't believe that generally people who need blood will be resistant in this way, because its potential to save lives in a very quick emergency situation is huge, but also the potential to treat people like we saw in the video with cancer treatments and things that require regular blood transfusions. But I think it's interesting what you said about like the racial aspect is really interesting as well, because one major problem that we've got in the UK at the moment is a real desperate need for black blood donors, also people with rare blood types, because people who suffer from sickle cell, for example, need regular blood transfusions and those blood types need to match, and it's very difficult to do that. So there is this incredibly pressing demand, not just in an emergency situation, but in treatment of various diseases and in surgeries as well. You need masses of blood in surgeries. So no, I don't think that there will be as much resistance to it as the people will be able to see the potential for it.
And in answer to that question of how close we are in terms of this research actually developing into some sort of product that we're able to use in a practical way, look, the the researchers behind the study that we're talking about today have applied for a patent on this method of treatment. So, naturally, there's an intention to monetize what they're doing, but they also say that they expect to need further studies over the next 3.5 years before they can even move on to controlled patient trials. So I think we're still a long way away from actually seeing this stuff in hospitals.
Incidentally, I mean, how many of us know our blood types? I know mine because I have in the past given blood, although I admit it was about 10 years ago. Any of you guys?
Well, I've given blood, but I was trying to find my blood card this morning to figure it out because I'd completely forgotten what my blood type was. So I called my mum to ask her what my blood type was, and she didn't know either. So I think that gives you an insight into if you don't know your blood type at the right time, that does present some problems.
Yeah, it's a problem, yeah. So Chandrika, do you know yours?
Nope.
Arian?
I only know because it's the most common one, which I think is O positive. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the one that it's compatible with about 80% of the population. So I think it's about less that have it, but it's compatible with anyone with a positive, like A positive or B positive. So it's pretty good. Yours is pretty good.
It's just not the greatest blood.
O positive is actually the one in most demand because it works for 80% of the population. So even though O negative works for everyone, there are so few people that have it that actually O positive people also need to be donating as well.
Yes. In the meantime, if you are listening in the UK and you want to sign up to become a blood donor, it's blood.co.uk to register. Okay, Arian, you're up next after this. Are you looking for an antidote to information overload? Well, at a time when the news cycle is moving faster than ever, The Week is here to help. Our new digital subscription includes a twice-daily digest of the day's most interesting, important stories, along with the liveliest comment and analysis delivered to your app or inbox. Head to theweek.com/offer and use the code SPRING24. That's SPRING24 at theweek.com/offer. Sale ends 6th of May. Okay, Arian, it's your turn. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
This week we learnt that at last, thanks to a new cinematic spectacular, every day can be D-Day.
That was too close. Man, we're going down.
The sound of a crowd enjoying the flight simulator at Normandy's D-Day Experience Museum, filmed by a visitor this Tuesday. Arian, what's the story?
Yeah, so this week the descendants of the 14 French soldiers who took part in D-Day have denounced plans for a new immersive show about D-Day that they say is nothing more than basically a cynical commercial venture. And the soldiers' families published an open letter in Le Monde newspaper to express their opposition to Normandy Memory, which is this $90 million project that will involve depicting D-Day in a moving theatre on rails. So not dissimilar in tone perhaps to what we were just listening to, which comes from an existing museum, but a much bigger and perhaps more sort of cinematographically exuberant version of the, of something that at heart
of the
was
horrors
pretty traumatic
of what those people went through. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
What are their objections to that?
Yeah, the letter describes this new moving theatre project as a memorial business machine for tour operators. They say this sort of show, which will be consumed by a variety of audiences, can only be simplistic and will inevitably focus on emotions and spectacular things rather than on history and reflection. So they're basically saying that it's going to do the job of further creating D-Day as this kind of visceral, enjoyable experience that you get to, I don't know, laugh along with. Like we're listening to those people taking part in the museum version of a D-Day dogfight. And I think that that's the thing that they're concerned about, that it's going to be more sensationalization of a thing that at heart was pretty traumatic.
I mean, to what extent do their opinions matter the most, Sir Chandrika? Because of course they're going to feel like that, and of course if you met them personally, you'd understand why they felt like that, and you'd empathise with it. But, they are going to die out very soon. You're going to be left with a generation of kids that need to be educated about what happened in World War II, and this might be a way to reach them.
There are some people backing this who you might not completely expect. So you do have the backing of a former French defence minister, the president of the Normandy Regional Council, the local mayor, like lots of quite powerful people in the local area who support this project, and they say that it's a good thing to go forward. The former French defence minister, he's called Hervé Morin, he said he fully supported the project as a means of marrying memory and touristic development, but done with dignity. And I think that's the issue here, isn't it? It's who feels it's dignified and who feels it's done in a way that's worthy of what these people suffered. And then you actually have sort of veterans who live in Normandy who are pro this as well. And then on the other hand, we have a veteran who is pro this project. So Charles Norman Shea, who's 98. He's an American veteran living in Normandy, and he took part in the first wave of landings at Omaha Beach. He's given the project his blessing as an appropriate tribute to the fallen. And so it does look as though the people writing this open letter are mainly the descendants and people who want to keep certain memories and keep a certain idea of the people they loved who lost their lives on D-Day. But it does seem that there are a lot of sort of people who are one step removed from what happened that day who are saying, well, actually, this is worth remembering and it's worth doing in this way. How much power and how much weight should we give to the descendants? It's such a tricky one because they're probably the best informed about what happened, certainly through personal stories and personal connections. And it's the people who aren't informed about D-Day and who haven't learnt about it and who don't see its importance in recent world history who haven't been reached yet. So I would probably put the emphasis on making sure it's not forgotten. As we've mentioned, like, the veterans are 98. They are not going to be alive for very much longer. And so these sort of first-person stories, the visceral feel of what they went through, I think it's important to share it with younger people so it'll be remembered in the future.
And those younger people, Harriet, are exposed anyway to films and video games about this period in history, which certainly show a lot of visceral detail, let's put it that way, even if the tone of those things is attempting to be respectful. So in that context, you know, that sort of material's around anyway. It makes sense when you actually go to the place, it's there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, World War II is a big favourite of Hollywood and of video games as well. I mean, it begs the question, is an immersive experience like this, is it so reasonably different from cinema and art? Is it that its purpose is to inform rather than entertain? But I wonder if whether something is informative or appropriate, or if it strays too far into the entertainment, these questions are always going to be relevant, but they're also going to be subjective. There's always going to be division over projects like this, and there has been significant division over projects and artistic representations and areas of historical tourism kind of similar to this. You know, there is immersive experiences of this kind about every major world war and genocide and historical atrocity all around the world, and they always divide opinion.
Like what?
I want to be really careful and say I'm not at all comparing D-Day to the Holocaust, not at all. But it's interesting that there are always and have always been similar conversations about how and whether we should commemorate the Holocaust. And Holocaust tourism is huge. I mean, it's an established phenomenon. There's tours of Anne Frank's house, of Dachau, of Auschwitz. There's a very similar immersive experience using Holocaust survivor testimonial to create virtual reality impressions in America. And there's 3 Holocaust films came out just this year, and there's been questions about should the Holocaust be commemorated on film all the way back to the Shoah documentary in 1985. And it's very, very controversial. And I don't think that there are easy answers, and I don't think there's ever going to be consensus.
I suppose in those examples, though, Arian, and we've talked about dark tourism on the show before as well, people visiting the killing fields in Cambodia, etc. In those cases, you are actually in the place where it happened. Now, the original plans for this French exhibit were that they would be on the beaches, but those have already been chucked out, haven't they? Because there was controversy about that. And so actually now it does feel a bit more like a kind of theme park, because you're not in the real place. You're a few miles away, but you're going to be in a purpose-built theatre.
Yes, that's true. And even so, I think there are concerns that even in this new location, the project is going to be theme park-like. It's meant to take up 32 acres of space. It's worth sort of going through what it is exactly. It's meant to be a 45-minute show where 1,000 spectators get on this mobile platform, which runs past several sets, and then screens open up to show different scenes where spectators get the feeling that they're embarking in New York to find themselves in the English training camps, and then they disembark before going right to the heart of the battle in Normandy. And so, there's kind of this, like, purely on the space that the site is meant to take up, which is meant to be vast, there's an ecological concern. There's also a sort of secondary concern that the existing museums are going to have the tourism that is currently going to them taken away from them. But I think sort of broader than that, I think there's a deeper concern that Normandy in particular is becoming a bit filled with peculiar reenactors. I saw this interesting report by Mark Urban, who's the diplomatic and defence editor of Newsnight, who went along to the 79th D-Day celebrations in Normandy on June 6th last year. And he said the landing beaches are taking on the quality of a living history theme park, and in the centre of the medieval city of Bayeux, almost every shop features D-Day window displays. He said that there's all of these reenactors who pose for photos, and the atmosphere is like a carnival. He said that there's restored military vehicles roaring around the narrow Norman lanes. And he said, simultaneously, there are still some veterans who come back year after year, and he said they have a disproportionate effect in dignifying everybody else's commemoration. And I think that's the other concern here, that as we slip further and further away from the actual events of World War II and D-Day in particular, and fewer people who were actually there and bore witness to what happened can attest to it, then we end up with this sort of theme park approximation that's built perhaps a little bit too much on the possibility of enjoyment. And I think that's where the broad concern of these descendants is coming from.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe too much for our taste, Chandrika, but I guess if you're planning an exhibit like this, you're thinking 30, 40 years into the future. And I mean, Titanic is a Broadway musical these days, isn't it? That would have seemed unthinkable when the descendants of those people that died on the ship were still alive. But now it's completely uncontroversial that that would be the case. And I mean, how do you reach children with this story when they've grown up in a different era to us, where we met people who had survived World War II and where, the word Hitler on a programme was a ratings grabber? In the future, that may not be the case anymore.
Yeah, and the competition that these stories are up against, children of the internet, basically, there are so many other things they could be watching. And also warfare itself has changed. And we're kind of exposed to warfare in a way that people weren't when D-Day happened. And so that story gets left behind and it gets shrouded in darkness and mystery if we don't keep pulling out of history and keep saying, look what happened. So much of history would have been different if this day had gone differently. And yeah, it seems to me that it must be something in the human psychology to kind of protect ourselves that we make these theme parks, or not quite theme parks, but almost like a route that certain tourists want to go round. As Harriet mentioned with, the Nazi concentration camps, they still exist. And it must be to try and make us feel the power of what happened on those days, which is very hard to get across, I think, in a classroom sometimes, or with just certain films or watching TV. I think that's what the people behind these things are always trying to make happen. For someone, an emotional experience is somebody else's undignified display. And I think we're always going to have those two sides. And it's hard to make everyone happy. But the fact is, with that, what we just heard about Normandy from Arian, people go, and on the one side, that's money for the people who operate these exhibitions and experiences. But these people are going and they are learning and they're remembering, and there is a plus side to it. They're not deciding to go and spend their money on, for instance, Disneyland. They're spending their money on this. So it's really tricky, isn't it? History is entertainment. There's still education going on, and there's still that act of remembering, which wouldn't have happened otherwise, that makes me feel, I don't know, I'm kind of okay with this. I think it could be a good thing.
I wonder what you think as well, Harriet, about just this being a bit of a culture clash in a way between a kind of American approach. It's interesting, Chandrika mentioned Disneyland. It strikes me that a lot of people that are visiting the D-Day museums probably are Americans who want to see what what their fathers and grandfathers did. And, you know, the American style is to do this kind of attraction in an area of historical interest. You know, I've been to Gettysburg, and that's exactly what they do there. And that's partly because, unlike in Western Europe, their museums aren't free. You have to pay $30 to go in, and you're expected to receive an experience. And they probably get to France, they think, what's this? Like, where's the thing? Where's the thing that I'm supposed to do? I've got my money and I want to give it to them so I can see the thing.
Oh, I don't know. I think that's a bit of a generalization, but it does remind me of the French director of the Shoah documentary, Claude Lanzmann, was incredibly critical of Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List. You know, in a similar way of a culture clash. But it's worth saying that both Shoah, the documentary, and Schindler's List have been incredibly criticized as falling short of what they were trying to do. But yeah, a similar culture clash between a French director and a Hollywood American director there. But that's not to say that one has more of a right to it than another. And I think what Suchandrika is saying, I do agree that human curiosity is better than forgetting, and we want to resist, I think, the risk of kind of putting this artificial mystique, this hermetic seal on the past that makes it distant and makes you think that it couldn't happen again or it isn't happening now. And you mentioned Cambodia as well. I mean, I went to the S21 prison in Phnom Penh in Cambodia, which was the most notorious interrogation center and prison of the Khmer Rouge. And at the time, I thought it was incredibly shocking and gratuitous. I mean, there's blood on the walls still. There's the shackles of the prisoners. You hear the testimony of people in the genocide trials. You hear the testimony of Pol Pot as well. I was incredibly shocked by it, and I've never forgotten it. And it made more of an impression on me, and I learned more than I think I ever would have done in a classroom or reading a book. And I had a similar experience in Sachsenhausen and in the memorials in Berlin as well. But then on the other hand, you have kind of what is espoused in the History Boys, you know, in the Alan Bennett play, wondering about whether all the memorials like the Cenotaph or the D-Day Immersive Experience are about veiling the truth, because there's no better way of forgetting something than by commemorating it. And it's not lest we forget, but lest we remember.
Arian, do you think ultimately this thing is going to get built, and, you know, in 10 years' time it will be an uncontroversial stopping point on people visiting northern France?
I think it's quite possible. You know, the controversy has been going on almost as long as the project has been in the works, which is since about 2020. And you'd think if a little bit of complaint was likely to slow them down or stop them altogether, then it would have spluttered out by now. But the fact that the project is still whirring on probably means that it is eventually going to get built. I think that once it is, then will it be controversial or not probably does depend on the sensitivity that it delivers, because yes, the people involved in it continue to say that it's going to be a thoughtful rendering of that historical moment. But, you know, if it does turn out to be all guts and glory, then I think there is a danger of creating exactly the sort of monument that Harriet's talking about. You know, one of those things that is in danger of reinforcing this idea that, you know, between World War I and World War II, World War I people say is the bad war and World War II is the good war, because they think of it as being finer and more noble and a bit higher, certainly in the intentions of the victors, than the previous war. But I think that even that, if that comes to be the sort of takeaway that people have from it, and particularly if it is pitched at visiting tourists, I think it's highly likely that that could be the case. Then I think, you know, there's a real danger in reinforcing the idea that World War II wasn't morally dubious on both sides, as it obviously was. And I think, you know, the proof will be in the pudding, but I think we are likely to get a pudding.
Yeah. The punt will be investing in a company based in Normandy that rents out dry ice machines, I reckon. Right. That would be a good time. So Chandrika, you're up next after this. You're finishing the show, so Chandrika, what do you think this week should be remembered for?
Weight loss drug Ozempic got an embarrassing celebrity shout-out.
Here is my week 4 compound semaglutide update. Last week, I don't think I did an update. I gained a pound. Not sure how that's possible, but I did. And then this week, I lost that pound. So there you go. But today, since I've been on it for 4 weeks now, I got to up my dose. So I'm at 10 units. So I'm not sure what that means. But it is definitely helping my appetite, my food noise, and I'm not as worried about the scale because it is what it is. The food noise was a big thing for me. So I'll keep you guys posted, but more to come.
TikToker remaking Jodie, documenting her weight loss journey this week. So Chandrika, what's the story, and also what is food noise?
Okay, so Bridesmaids actor Melissa McCarthy posted a picture on her Instagram of herself and director Adam Shankman as they attended a charity gala in honour of renowned choreographer Matthew Bourne. And then McCarthy's friend and legend Barbara Streisand commented under the picture, "Give him my regards, did you take a Ozempic?" All one sentence.
If anyone else has septuagint octogenarians tweeting and texting them, they'll know this is not an unfamiliar combination of words. It's okay, no punctuation, but you see the two thoughts colliding. It's fine.
She's absolutely thriving. So she's like, OMG, I went on Instagram to see the photos we posted of the beautiful flowers I received for my birthday. Below them was a photo of my friend Melissa McCarthy, who I sang with on my Encore album. She looked fantastic. I just wanted to pay her a compliment. I forgot the world is reading.
So there'd been a lot of people, having seen her original post, saying, hold on, Babs, don't go about writing underneath someone's profile, whoever it is, did you take Ozempic? That's a no-no. And then she had to issue this kind of semi-apology.
Yes, and then a couple of things I like about just this entry into the world of Ozempic is firstly, it's Barbara Streisand putting the Streisand effect to work, and that is an unintended consequence of attempts to hide, remove or censor information where the effort instead increases public awareness of the information. So I feel like the apology just made it even bigger. So with the increased celebrity use of the drug, it can be known as semaglutide generically, or as Wegovy as well, and people like Oprah and Elon Musk have used it. So it does seem as though Ozempic use could start to seem normal, and that feels quite concerning.
Why does it feel concerning, Sir Chandrika?
So basically, I don't think I'm alone in being concerned. Like, there's been a huge increase in the number of people getting Ozempic or one of the generic equivalents prescribed to them. In the US, between 2019 and 2023, there's been an increase of 932% in semaglutide medications. It's actually been banned as a treatment for obesity in the UK due to the high demand for the drug causing a global shortage.
Exactly, but that's about high demand. It's not about any particular risk factors associated with it. So what's the concern? I mean, a lot of people that are taking it, including people like Elon Musk and Oprah, are basically saying this is a miracle drug. I've dropped 5 dress sizes. I feel great. What's the problem?
Yeah, so semaglutide is this weekly injection that helps lower blood sugar by helping the pancreas make more insulin. If you do not have diabetes, it was meant for diabetes patients, then it can lead to nausea, fatigue, indigestion, constipation, diarrhea, vomiting, and increased burping. So it's quite antisocial, I'd say, those side effects. And actually, there have been reported cases of much more serious side effects, which are really worrying. So pancreatitis, and you're much more likely to get that if you don't have diabetes, but you do take the drug. Development of thyroid cancer and suicidal ideation or behaviour. So those are the really terrifying side effects, which are much less common, but they have been reported.
Yes. And Harriet, Johan Hari's just written a book about this, hasn't he? Which I don't know if you saw was serialised in the Times. I read it a couple of weeks ago, I think. Reaction?
Don't
just from his name?
even get me started.
Okay.
Don't even get me started on the fact that he has told this story in so many different ways with so many different inconsistencies and so much factual inaccuracy and so much problematic stuff. I do not think that would be the book to read if you wanted an accurate representation of the world of what we're talking about.
Okay, well, I won't get you started then, but my question was, one of the things that he highlighted in the excerpt that I read, which was very compelling and readable, despite your concerns, was that for him, because he's been taking Ozempic for a couple of years now, what he felt was that although he was losing weight, it wasn't treating the underlying reason that he ate in the first place, which was psychological. And that actually, whatever the medical concerns are, like the ones that Sir Chandrika outlined, that's the more generic thing. Fat people often seek refuge in comfort food because they need comforting from something, and getting thinner doesn't resolve the thing they're trying to seek comfort from.
No, absolutely. I definitely think it's worth saying that these weight loss drugs, they don't treat the genetic or socioeconomic or poverty factors that can drive obesity, but what they do treat is obesity, which is in itself a very, very dangerous medical condition. And I think about 1 billion people in the world are now obese, and it's projected to go up to 1 in 4. It's a medical condition that is a huge burden on the world. So no, obviously losing weight could not treat the reasons why you might have gained weight in the first place, but what it can treat is all the medical conditions associated with being so overweight. So I think that also I want to put on record that Johann Hari is a plagiarist. So I also just want to say that. But I think he has unintentionally perhaps put his finger on a very interesting thing, which is the kind of a seismic effect of these drugs across all industries. I mean, I think that's what makes this an interesting story, is it really highlights just how ubiquitous weight loss drugs have become, that they've affected like the fashion industry, celebrity, health. There's many scientific experiments going on with these drugs at the moment. They're finding that they're doing other amazing and dangerous things. The economics of Denmark have totally changed because Novo Nordisk, the pharmaceutical company that makes Ozempic and now makes Wegovy, which has the same semaglutide compound, it's just 2 different brand names. It's basically bigger than the entire Danish economy, its market worth now. So there's Denmark's economy and there's this one pharmaceutical company. But I also think that the reaction to Barbra Streisand's comment is interesting because it says a lot about the shame that is associated with these kinds of treatments, which I think is fascinating. Would people's reaction, would it have been so similar if she'd asked, are you on statins, or are you having green juice? Or there's so much shame that even though, as we said, all these celebrities, including very famously over here, Stephen Fry and Robbie Williams too, they're all saying, Boy George very famously said, well, isn't everyone on it? And it's true that the Oscars this year became known as the Ozempic Oscars because you can see all these suddenly super skinny celebrities, all the rich celebrities are on it. But I think that to just look at it through that lens would do a disservice to the potential to change this massive global health epidemic.
Yeah, well, that's maybe the reluctance for celebrities themselves, Arian, is to be influencers on this, because they know that if they come out and say, thank you for saying I look fabulous, and yes, the answer is I've been taking Ozempic, that will have an impact on other people who will go and try and get a prescription for themselves. A, possibly depriving people with diabetes who might need it, and B, possibly bringing about these side effects that we've talked about, and they don't want to be responsible for that. It's right, isn't it, that they feel some responsibility there?
I think so, and I think that there's a third thing that is being speculated upon both in the original crime of Streisand and then her apology, which is what's being called this spiral back into skinny culture. And I think the minute celebrities start talking honestly and openly about whether they're taking these weight loss drugs or not, then it feeds into this trend that was identified by the New York Post when, I don't know if you remember, but Kim Kardashian wore that Marilyn Monroe dress, the original Marilyn Monroe dress, and she revealed that she had lost 16 pounds really, really rapidly to squeeze into it at the Met Gala last year. And the New York Post published this headline, "Bye Bye Booty, Heroin Chic is Back." And, you know, it kind of like coincided with this interest in all of these stars who are taking Ozempic, like Adele, Rebel Wilson, Mindy Kaling, Elon Musk, etc. And I think there are growing concerns that the more you highlight the idea that celebrities are working towards an, inverted commas, ideal body type, then the more people in the real world who maybe don't fit that body type get concerned about what they need to do to try and conform to what society regards as the one type of beauty. And I think that is the other concern. And that's the thing that Barbra Streisand didn't understand when she was like, oh, sorry, I meant to say that you looked fabulous. But that reinforces that idea that people aren't saying, you know, you said the wrong thing by exposing the fact that she takes Ozempic. They were saying, you're reinforcing this negative idea of there being a perfect body image.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one, isn't it, Sir Chandrika? I'm overweight, and I look at celebrities like the ones you've just mentioned, and there was a time where I thought, well, that's quite empowering, that here's this person who seems to be very happy and proud of their body image, and yet they are clearly overweight. But then that in itself we're talking about the dangerous signal that you're sending out by saying I need to lose weight, but there's possibly a dangerous signal that you're sending out and saying it's okay to be this fat when we know that it causes premature death.
I think that there's a thing with celebrity that there has to be something unattainable about them, about the image of them. And so like 10, 15 years ago, celebrities would not let on about the nutritionists they have and the personal trainers. Like, you never got a really true response. What you got was pictures of skinny celebrities eating a burger which they're never going to finish, but saying like, oh, and I love a burger, and the interviewer always commenting, particularly on female celebrities, like, she's lithe and skinny and gorgeous, and we sat down and she had like 3 burgers. And so there's always been this kind of disconnect between the image we see and which becomes the ideal, and then how celebrities say they live. And it just feels the Ozempic situation that to be real about it also feels like it would break that kind of glass wall between us and celebrities and let us in on this thing that's working for them. But then also it does seem to me to play around with the hormones and enzymes in your body is a scary thing to do. I don't think I said what food noise was, but food noise is about always thinking about food and where, what your next meal is going to be, where you're going to have it, good food versus bad food, how many calories have gone in and how many you have left maybe for that day. And it's so interesting to me that Ozempic stops those thoughts. And it just goes to show like how powerful these hormones are, how powerful this drug is. The moment you come off it, the thoughts come back, you start to feel hungry again. And you just go back to kind of square one. And surely it is better to change your lifestyle and get support in changing your lifestyle. So it scares me, Ozempic. It scares me it's becoming normalised.
And from that point of view, just leaving the celebrities out of it for a moment, Harriet, this controversy of the idea, this contentiousness around the idea of saying to your mate, basically, albeit on social media, are you on Ozempic? Is that what you're doing? Is it right that that's a controversial thing to say, or will it become normalised? Would you pause before asking one of your friends if they were taking it?
God, I mean, I'm British, so I would never say anything like this, but I'm not saying that means that it's wrong. I do think, though, that saying surely we should just change our lifestyle, I think that's a completely inadequate thing to say, considering that we've got 1 billion people in the world for all sorts of reasons, and that crosses all sorts of national and cultural and socioeconomic background divides. 1 billion people struggling with obesity in the world. It's not reasonable to blame people and to tell them just change your lifestyle. Like, it is a medical condition like any other, and if there are weight loss drugs or medical drugs that are available to treat a medical condition, then there shouldn't be any shame around people using that. What I think the problem is, though, is that it's kind of this 2-tiered system at the moment. I mean, I did a little bit of research on the UK side of how easily I could get a weight loss drug like this in the UK, and Wegovy was approved for use in the UK last year, and the NHS started prescribing it in September, but only for specific things, so only for people above a BMI of 35 and struggling with health issues related to weight. So it's worth saying that the NHS will prescribe it if and where it's appropriate and needed in the UK. But it took me about 5 minutes to find an online pharmacy, a private online pharmacy that would sell it to me for an extortionate price. So what that is creating a situation where this potentially life-saving treatment for a medical condition that affects 1 in 8, 1 in 7 people in the world, if it's only going to be available to rich celebrities or people with the wealth to access it from a private doctor, even if they don't necessarily need it, that in itself will be creating like a new health inequality.
And what kind of price are we talking? Are we talking designer mineral water or
Gucci we're talking actually a lot less than I expected, like a few £100 for a month's supply.
Okay, so it's just an extra percentage on your ball gown, isn't it? If you are going to a posh party, I mean, you can see why people are tempted.
Well, you can see why this is something that you can see across celebrities, and you can see it. I mean, like Boy George said, aren't we all taking it now? It's become incredibly normalized to the point where now you've got interviews with celebrity personal trainers and exercise people who say, well, it's really hard to train celebrities now because they have to go throw up, and they're always throwing up right before because they're all on Ozempic or Wegovy or whatever the brand name is for the compound semaglutide that they're taking. But so yeah, it's ubiquitous in a very specific subsection of society. But if it's possible that it's refined and can be available to anyone suffering from obesity, then that could potentially actually heal the world
Arian, would you ask a celebrity if they're taking Ozempic if you were interviewing them?
I think I probably wouldn't, but I just, it does make me appreciate maybe that Barbra Streisand probably didn't mean any harm when she said what she said, because like you think about the Jimmy Kimmel joke that he made at those Ozempic Oscars. He said, "When I look around this room, I can't help but wonder, is Ozempic right for me?" The whole notion, like the very foundation of that joke is built on the idea that every single person in the room is taking it. And so when Streisand said to Melissa McCarthy, "Are you taking Ozempic?" she just meant, "Wow, girl, you look fantastic," is what she was trying to say. So I sort of want to forgive her on that basis, but no, I don't think I'd be asking
I don't think Barbra Streisand needs your forgiveness, Arian. And whilst we're here on this, actually, does anyone have a favourite Barbra Streisand moment looking back across her career? I mean, for me, it's got to be Guilty with Barry Gibb.
I love the fact that she has her own underground shopping mall. I think that is a new level of icon. That's a level of celebrity that Melissa McCarthy could never hope to emulate.
So Chandrika?
Oh, just Yentl, I think. The whole of Yentl.
I loved that in the South Park movie, Barbra Streisand's name became the punchline to what the very worst swear word could possibly be that like the little kids could think of, that Barbra Streisand was it.
Okay, well, don't rain on my parade. My thanks to Harriet, Sachandrika and Arian. You can follow this show for free and get every episode as soon as it's released by searching for The Week Unwrapped wherever get your podcasts and tapping follow. It's what Barbra Streisand would do. Queen. You can also get 6 free issues of The Week magazine with a trial subscription when you go to theweek.co.uk/subscribe. Streisand would be sent a complimentary one. In the meantime, I've been Ollie Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer, Ollie Peart at Rethink Audio. And until we meet again to unwrap next week, bye-bye.